Welcome back. Let's continue to this now. President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected to arrive in the U.S. today ahead of his Wednesday meeting with President Donald Trump. Let's now bring in SABC News correspondent who is in Washington, D.C. for us, Sherwin Bryce, Pease, just to give us the latest on this particular meeting. Sherwin, a very good afternoon to you. So there's so much speculation around how President Ramaphosa will be received and how the meeting will unfold with President Trump. So, of course, no doubt that this is going to be a tough meeting given the strained relations. A number of issues, of course, on the table. Unpack for us, what can we expect today?
Well, I think what you're seeing from the South African presidency, Unati, is an early arrival by President Ramaphosa for this all-important meeting on Wednesday at the White House. Our expectation initially was that he would only arrive tomorrow, Tuesday, a day before. It's kind of how these overseas visits work. But I think really showing you the emphasis and the great attention to detail that the presidency is putting into this trip. Of course, he will be accompanied by a number of key ministers, cabinet officials, including his minister in the presidency, Kumbutsa Mchabeni, the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Minister Lamola, who is arriving later this evening here in Washington, D.C. John Steenhuisen is here in his capacity, both as a member of the Government of National Unity, but in the main as Minister of Agriculture. And then, of course, the all-important key ministry here, not to elevate it above the rest, but I think it's true to say that Parks Tau, as Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, has a very pivotal role to play here in terms of the future economic relationship, the future economic strategic relationship with the United States, a $20 billion relationship as it pertains to South Africa's preferential status in terms of the African Growth and Opportunity Act. But certainly another issue, the tariffs, the reciprocal tariffs, which Parks Tau will be seeking to address here. Then, of course, you get the geopolitical concerns, right? The issue of Gaza, South Africa taking Israel to the International Court of Justice. And then, of course, also the issue of South Africa's mediation role in Ukraine, where they could find some synergies with the U.S. administration. But I think the big sticking point, of course, the elephant in the room is going to be the accusation of genocide leveled against President Ramaphosa's administration as it relates to white Afrikaners who have already started arriving in the United States as refugees, and the pushback that many within the Ramaphosa constituency will be expecting from South Africa's president, because as we well know, Unati, there is no genocide in South Africa, and so the accusation and allegation is not based on any fact, certainly that we could sniff around and follow. Certainly a moment to observe. These Oval Office meetings tend to be televised, and when the cameras are rolling, one can expect pretty much anything. Unati.
And on that note of the genocide, again, President Cyril Ramaphosa reiterated the country's stance on the matter. He was speaking on the sidelines of the Advocate Duma Nokwe as a reburial on the weekend, saying there's no genocide in South Africa. That's a fact that's borne out of a lot of evidence, he said. But, in a conversation I had earlier, of course, as we continue to analyze just what we can expect, it does also seem that President Cyril Ramaphosa will have to balance a number of issues, staying firm on South Africa's own principles, particularly when it comes to transformation, land issues, etc., but also appreciating the U.S. as a key trade partner to South Africa.
And so that's the balance, right? You make a very good point. What is the balance between not being bullied, but also asserting South Africa's sovereignty here? South Africa's sovereignty as it pertains to its foreign policy objectives, its sovereign right to question the conduct of Israel in terms of the Genocide Convention of 1948, which is at the center of its case at the International Court of Justice, and then also forward-looking, right? This is a strategic relationship that is important to both countries. You heard from Minister Ntshabeni the other day that over 600 American companies are invested in South Africa. So how you thread this needle between affirming your sovereignty, affirming your righteousness as it pertains to the conduct of this government vis-a-vis the Afrikaners in South Africa, but also then not scuppering the broader picture here, the economic relationship that is so fundamental to a country like South Africa, where you've just seen the official unemployment rate go up. The economic burden on the South African government must be weighing on their ability to engage the Trump administration's allegations around genocide. So it'll be a deft performance, if you will, from the president of South Africa in this sort of live televised format, right, where anything can happen. Remember, it's not just going to be a conversation in that moment between Donald Trump and Cyril Ramaphosa. There are a number of journalists in the room. The SABC hopes to be there. A number of South African media will be there. The international contingent that covers the White House will be in the room. So you can expect journalists to lob questions at both principals in real time. And so the unexpected nature of how that might play out remains to be seen. But certainly one imagines the president will spend the afternoon here when he arrives, and of course all day tomorrow, really getting into the granular details with members of his cabinet, with members of his entourage, so that they are well prepared for anything that could happen in that Oval Office meeting on Wednesday.
And I'm glad you painted that picture, Sherwin, because there is so much uncertainty around just how this will all play out and unfold. You've given us briefly the sense in terms of who is going to be flanking President Cyril Ramaphosa. Of course, we know that 4 ministers are with him. What are we likely to see then in terms of who will be in the Oval Office with President Trump?
Well, we're due to get a media briefing from the president's media team around 4 p.m. your time tomorrow. That's kind of what we've been told now. So we don't know. We know there's a lot of TBC, to be confirmed details around this trip. The program tomorrow, we don't know if there'll be additional engagements with members of Congress, with, for example, the Black Caucus in the United States Congress. I just simply do not have the details as yet, because I think the presidency is still sorting those out. But you are quite correct. I imagine that the entire delegation will be accompanying the president to the White House. John Steenhuisen, Minister Ntshabeni, Minister Lamola, Minister Parkstown. We also understand that the newly appointed U.S. envoy Mcebisi Jonas is also on his way to the United States. And let me tell you this, we are not going to get a deal signed and sealed tomorrow. They're not going to walk out of that Oval Office meeting going, well, we've just penned a new document, a new deal between South Africa. This will be the beginning of a conversation, and the continuation of the conversation will depend on how well the Wednesday meeting goes. So there are still too many unknowns here, but we can certainly surmise that with the Minister of Agriculture here, the focus will be on the almost $1 billion plus exports in terms of South African agriculture to the United States. John Steenhuisen is seeking to expand that, but he's also a white representative of a government of national unity that needs to assert his position in terms of whether there is a genocide targeting white people in South Africa or not, right? He's also the leader of the former official opposition in South Africa, now the Democratic Alliance, of course, undergirding part of the government of national unity. The big focus will be at Parkstown. Does he have a deal in his pocket? If AGOA goes away, what are the options for South Africa moving forward? Will there be some rare earth mineral deals that one could speculate in terms of a future relationship with the United States? What does a new bilateral trade agreement between South Africa and the United States look like in the absence of AGOA being renewed come September this year? And then you've got, the strategist, Minister Ntshabeni, and of course, Ronald Lamola, right? The geopolitical divides are well known. The ICJ issue will be front and center, but also there are synergies in the geopolitical relationship, particularly as it relates to engagement with Russia, particularly as it relates to engagement with Ukraine. So those are kind of the broad parameters. The specifics will only be known once they meet come Wednesday, Unati.
And you're quite right, Sherwin. I want to squeeze this last point in, given that this is not a state visit, we're not likely to see any major deals being signed, etc. But there has been a lot of talk around the role of Elon Musk. I mean, there are reports that South African officials are preparing a trade proposal of some sorts to present to President Trump, with one potential proposal involving Tesla. I mean, what are you hearing on that front?
Yeah, the details also around, a possible deal for Starlink, the question of the 30% foreign ownership in South Africa in terms of its broad economic empowerment legislation. These are the grey areas that I think the South African delegation is going to have to be very deft about. That they're going to have to adjust in terms of whether they're going to want to have that discussion with the US contingent. But let's not forget that a lot of the speculation around the posture of the United States towards South Africa in recent months, the suspicion has been that Elon Musk has had the ear of Donald Trump, and he has been inserting various ideas. You've seen how he tweets about South Africa, the misrepresentations he has made about the lack of a Starlink license in South Africa, saying over and over that the only reason he's not operating that license in South Africa is because he's black. As you well know, his race has got nothing to do with it. South Africa's BEE legislation is very clear. Whether you're a black foreign owner or a white foreign owner, the 30% in terms of getting a BEE disadvantaged group partnership in terms of your investment in the country is clear to all. So there's a lot of misconceptions and blatant lies that the South African delegation is going to have to push back on. But how they do that without offending their hosts is going to be very interesting to observe.
Absolutely, and of course, race also playing a very pivotal part. But thank you so much, Sherwin, for that update. Okay, Sherwin, Bryce, Pease in Washington, D.C. for us, of course, ahead of that much-anticipated meeting between President Trump as well as President Cyril Ramaphosa.